So for Day of Giving, we're going to actually focus on native plants here, and I've collected about 8 or so plants that you're going to see throughout the day of plants that are native actually here in North Carolina that you can use in your garden. Some are more useful than others. Some of them are more fun as far as I'm concerned, and you might not think that they are native, but I'll start with this one here, and this one is it's in a group of plants that are almost entirely native to North America. There's one lone species native to Asia, actually, in Siberia, are the phlox. And the one I have right here is Phlox nivalis. And this is actually a collection I made from Chatham County a few years back, found along the road. This is Phlox nivalis, and this is just a near white form. It has a hint of pink to it. This is comparable to those further north who grow Phlox subulatus, the creeping phlox or moss pinks. This is commonly called trailing phlox. Most of the time it's pink, but like I said, there are some white forms as well. And this is one here. It's just starting to come into flower now here in mid-March. And it is a stunner when it's in full flower. It's a little more prickly than the Phlox subulatus that you're more familiar with. Phlox in general, there are so many of them. They range from growing in high elevations and alpines in the western United States, which I've had the opportunity to see, to plants growing in desert conditions, to growing in woodland conditions, but often on edges of places where you'll find a lot of them. Roadsides or cliff edges in the mountains of North Carolina are places you'll often see these. And this is one that you're going to see in a more open area, this Phlox nivalis. It's just a great little ground cover. It'll flower for about a month or so here in March and April, maybe venture in a little bit of May as well. But we do get a few early flowers, sometimes even as early as February for us. But just a great little native plant here for us, and it's an evergreen, so great small scale ground cover too. So this is one to try if you can find it.
So you've got it in the rock garden here.
I have it on the roof, actually out on the scree. This is in real soil here.
Okay, do you want to talk about its soil conditions for a second?
Okay, so Phlox nivalis is pretty resilient, as is its cousin, like I said, Phlox subulata, which is a northerly species. Phlox nivalis occurs to the south, from more or less southern Virginia south into even parts of Florida. But it occurs in a wide variety of soils, but it wants a well-drained soil is ideal. It doesn't want to be wet. But I'm growing this out on our roof garden in permatil with compost mixed in a little bit. And here, this is actually growing in real garden soil here. This is really nice garden soil. I don't water it though, unless it is downright atrociously dry. So this is just an easygoing plant, low maintenance.
Do you know if it has any issues with deer or rabbits?
Rabbits.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've not had any issue with deer, but I don't have deer in the garden, but I don't think that's going to be a major issue. I have had trouble with rabbits with my Phlox nivalis, and other parts of the garden where they're a little bit more readily available to the rabbits, they have gnawed them to nothing. But the ones up here on the roof, even though I occasionally do get a rabbit up here, they haven't bothered these, thank goodness, and they have done beautifully up here. So cute little phlox for us, and this one wants full blazing sun to do best. It'll take a little bit of shade too, but so those rabbits clearing things out around it is not a bad thing, just so they don't eat it. So anyways, another great little phlox here. Another plant I have here that is a native, and you might not think of this being as a native. We actually have cacti native to North Carolina. This is one of 3 species we have in North Carolina, and this is probably the most widely distributed species of that within North Carolina, but also of this in this genus. This probably has one of the widest distributions. This is Opuntia humifusa, the eastern prickly pear, and this is actually a collection I made again here in Wake County of all places. About probably 15 years ago I did that. It's easy from stem cutting, so I really didn't hurt the population where I got it, because you just simply take off a stem. But anyways, this is a really cool native cactus. And during the winter and spring, it's pretty much flat on the ground. It'll get about 6-8 inches tall whenever it's actively growing in the summer, when it's fully turgid. It is commonly called a prickly pear, like I said, and here's actually some of the fruit from last year, and you can see why they're called a pear. If you look at it, it has that kind of a pear shape to it. And the stems on here are evergreen. There are short-lived leaves whenever it first starts to flush and form new stems in the late spring, early summer. And about the same time it's actually in flower with about 2-inch yellow blossoms on it. It's a great little plant for a hard to grow spot. It'll grow in regular soil, but it doesn't want to be wet is the key thing. I've seen this species actually out in the mountains on a rock outcrop. I've seen this species in Virginia along the roads. It grows where I'm from in western Pennsylvania. It grows the whole way up into the southernmost part of Maine, in southern parts of Ontario, and it goes the whole way west to the Rocky Mountains, and then down to Florida. It has a really wide distribution on this species. But again, we don't think about cacti here. There's 2 other species which are much more common out of the coast. One is stricta, I believe, and the other I'm blanking on. But the stricta is an upright growing species, looks very similar to this, and the other species has more rounded stems on it instead of the flat pads. But they all have yellow flowers. In apunchias in general, they are New World. Actually, cacti are almost exclusively into the New World. The apunchiids, or prickly pear type cactus, there are species both in North and South America. So it is a native to the Western Hemisphere, if nothing else. But most of your apunchias are going to be in the United States, from the southern Canada south, and then they go into Mexico, and even Central America and northern South America. So a really cool group of native plants for us, and one that you don't often think about growing. It does, as you might guess, want to have a lot of sun to grow in. That's why I said I've seen it on rock outcrops in the western United States, or western North Carolina. I've seen it on roadsides though too, which get mown. It tends to miss the mower because it's so flat. And if you do chop it up, it probably will just propagate itself too that way. Super easy to grow for that purpose. It wants a well-drained soil, like I said, and full sun. I don't think the rabbits are going to bother this. They have not. I've never had any issue, nor the deer. So that's a question we don't even need to worry about here. There are some forms that have lots of spines on them. They almost all have what are called glaucids, and I actually got one in my finger when I picked it up, which are the tiny little hair-like spines that you can't see until it's too late. They don't hurt, they annoy you more than anything else. But it's easy to plant. I didn't even actually plant it in this spot. Someone probably picked up a pad and threw it down from an adjacent bed, and it got over here. So super easy to propagate as well. You can grow them from seed. That's way more difficult though than from cuttings. But just a really cool plant to try growing in your landscape.
So there are spines, you mentioned the spines,
yeah,
but there's barely any.
On this one.
Okay.
There's some forms that are really spiny. There's a lot of variation within species of apunchias, including Apunchia humifusus.
So you're not necessarily pruning off the spines for the sake of
No, just this form I found just has a handful of spines. I'm picking that. There's one whole big spine on that one. There's 2 on this pad, one there. Most of these don't have spines on them. They just have glaucids, which are the little tiny hair-like spines, which you don't see until it's too late. Like I said, I think I have one in my index finger, or not my index, my middle finger on my right hand now from picking that up a minute ago. But it's not overly vicious, but it is just a cool novelty to grow in your landscape.
And you said you found it in Wake County?
Yep.
Where at?
Near Lizard Lick.
Okay.
There's a really cool population out there growing on a rock outcrop of all things in Lizard Lick. So this is a plant here that you may have in your landscape and you don't even realize it. This is a type of Thuja occidentalis, or Arborvitae, or let's see, they also call it Eastern white cedar. a fellow yesterday was asking me about cedars, and it's like, yeah, cedars aren't native here. It's only a common name, and this is one of those ones that have a common name of cedar. So anyways, this is the common Arborvitae. I think people more around here call them Arborvitaes, and this is one, this is a juvenile form here called congabe, and it's something fireman, I forget, fire in its name, but anyways, some forms are much more conical and upright. Well, there's juvenile ones which are more globose and have more needly leaves than scale-like ones which you get on mature trees. But anyways, this native plant here ranges from actually more or less northwestern parts of North Carolina, Tennessee, up to the north and east into Canada. It's been planted extensively though throughout the whole United States, and it makes a great hedgerow, windbreak, or even a foundation shrub, an accent plant on a corner. They are very tolerant plants. They're very cold tolerant, but they can take some wet soils, they can take dry soils. Very resilient for us. And wonderfully used in our landscapes. Some forms get bronzy or orangey tones during the winter, while others stay dark green. I can't notice it as much. Oh, actually, I do get it. They have a nice, pleasant fragrance to me on the true Arborvitaes. It's kind of a little bit fruity. It's not the piney fragrances that you get from so many conifers. But they will grow in heart shade to sun. Even back home in Pennsylvania, we have one that gets growing in the shade, and it's been there for probably 70 years. So they are really, again, resilient plants. You can use them instead of Leyland cypress, which is so common around here. Like I said, they're just a really widely adaptable shrub for us here, or small tree. And they don't necessarily take up a lot of space, which is another great thing. There's forms that, we have one called unicorn out in the conifer garden, and it's about 15 inches wide at most and about 12 feet tall now. So really, interesting structures on some of them. You go from these nice round globes to pencil thin upright plants. So there's something that'll fit in almost any landscape. Deer, they may eat them. Especially the adult forms, I've seen them actually eating more so than the juvenile forms, but it tends to be lower down on the plant than higher up. Of course, that's good because the adult forms tend to be upright. I have another native here, and this is a really cool little ground covering daisy of all things. This is an erigeron, or a fleabane is a common name for most erigerons, but this one typically goes by Robin's plantain. It's not a plantain at all, because that's a totally different group of plants. So it's not that weed that grows in your lawn, but it keeps a low profile when it's not in flower. This is a Erigeron pulchellus, if I get the right P word out, and it's just starting to flower here. I do not remember which cultivar this is right now, but that doesn't matter. There's only a couple that you see out there, but the species is as good as far as I'm concerned. This is a pale lavender to sometimes white flowers on these, and they'll get about 12 to 15 inches tall when they're in full flower. This is just starting to get going. There are actually buds pushing here and over there and there. So this is going to be a great early late winter, early spring flowering perennial forest that can be used in the foreground. I put this here in this bed, and for instance, because it is so low when it's in foliage, that later on in the summer when there's other things back in here, this just the display just tapers down to the ground, and you have this nice foliage here and nothing blocking what's behind it. But it's there early on whenever there's nothing else. But you can find this species throughout the eastern United States in reality, from the Mississippi east pretty much. And we do have it in this part of the state of North Carolina, but it's much more common in the mountains actually. The mountains of North Carolina, northern Georgia, South Carolina, and Tennessee are one of the hot spots in the southeast for this species. And I've actually had the opportunity to see this in the wild out around Asheville several years ago now. But it grows the whole way up into the New England states where it's actually fairly common up there as well. But it has this soft foliage on these rosettes that is with the flowers coming up out of them. And actually I would grow this just for its rosettes even if it did not have flowers. It's a great low ground cover. It may get eaten a little bit by deer. I have not had rabbits actually touching this here, so I doubt the rabbits are actually going to bother it because I have a high number of rabbits in this garden, unfortunately. They have not trimmed this to make it look this compact. In the wild, you'll see it growing in open forest, but here it'll take full blazing sun as well. So it's versatile in that aspect. I wouldn't put it in full dark shade, but if it can get a deciduous shade, light deciduous shade is probably excellent for it into full sun. And it's not too picky about soils as well, probably as long as it's not saturated soaking water in water, it will be fine and dandy. Well-drained soils are fine. And it hasn't become a weed or anything. I have not had seedlings popping up in the garden. It does send out runners to the sides, and they root in that way, but they're very easy to pull out and divide. It's a great little, like I said, small scale ground cover for us. You can use it much like you would a juga, but in a sunnier location.
Does this die back completely, or is this all new growth?
I mean, it always has some active, it's pretty much evergreen for us here. Maybe further north and west, it'll probably die back to the ground, would be my guess. It's never totally dormant for us here. So we have a presence year round. Like I said, use it like you would a juga, but in the full sun. The next plant here I have is a verbena, or what used to be a verbena. It's now split out into its different genera, called glandularia. But this is the verbena that you probably know of growing as an annual or half-hardy perennial in containers, whether in a basket or just a general container, or even using a summer ground cover, and it comes in a variety of colors. But this is the native wild form. This is Glandularia canadensis. This is actually a white form here, which is a little less common. And I have the straight species right here, which is more of this rosy pink color here. And commonly it's called, oh darn, I'm blanking. I have to look at my sheet to cheat. It is rose moss vervain, or like I say, verbena. And this does range into North Carolina. It's sporadic here in the, it's not very common in North Carolina, though it can be found growing in the wild. You go into the south central part of the United States again, and this becomes a much more common wildflower. But it is a native, and it's not a long-lived plant for us here. This is a short-lived perennial or even an annual, depending on the year. Super easy to grow though. It wants full sun, evenly moist to relatively dry soils are conducive for it to grow and prosper. And this is March, mid-March, and you can see this white one's in full flower already. It'll flower just about any time of the year, but mostly spring and again in the fall, in the cooler times of the year, but not necessarily the coldest times of the year for us here in North Carolina. But you can get some sporadic flowering in the winter months as well. And in the summer, it sometimes takes a vacation, or it may fizzle out. Like I said, it's not necessarily long-lived, but they often self-sow, though not to the extent of being a weed by any means. And the other way, it also layers itself rather easily. So, or you could take cuttings of it, and that's actually how I came up with these white ones here. These were planted last fall of all times, and you can see how nice they're looking right now already. So, just a good plant for a sunny spot, maybe light shade at most. Give you anywhere from, like I said, you can have flowers almost any time of the year on this. It's a low grower. This form gets to about 12 to 15 inches tall if it's really happy. But most of the time you're going to see it in the 8 to 10 inch range, and it's actually not a bad thing for it to stay a little bit shorter. It's not necessarily as prostrate as some of the other verbenas that you might grow. Though, again, like I said, it's a good, reliable plant for us here and easy to grow. It makes a nice statement for us. Like I said, it'll self-sow. It's a self-perpetuating plant, though not a weed. And it grows naturally, probably in grasslands, disturbed areas, and that's very fitting based on the situations that it grows in our landscapes too. It helps it to be one to perpetuate itself whenever it's in a disturbed area. If it's something that just sits there, it's not going to like it. It needs an open, sunny spot to do its best. So another of our natives, and this is one that, I mean, we get questions about this genus all the time, hydrangea, when to prune it and everything. This is one of our native ones. It's actually so much easier than the Asian hydrangeas that everyone has in their landscape. But these are becoming more popular. But this is one of a couple species of hydrangea that we have native in the southeastern United States. This is Hydrangea quercifolia, the oak-leafed hydrangea, and it's a semi-evergreen or tardily deciduous shrub for us here in the Raleigh area, and it ranges from I think southwestern parts of North Carolina into the further down in the deep south, as well as up into the lower Midwest, Arkansas area. In Missouri even. So it has a fairly wide distribution. It often grows in less than typical hydrangea conditions. In the wild, it may grow in rock outcrops or drier situations than what we think of as, I say hydrangea, as in hydration, water. They're so water hungry. This is not as much. I mean, it doesn't want to be dry, but it is much more conducive to our modern landscapes and our changing environments here. Heat and somewhat dry conditions are not a problem for it. It flowers in late spring, early summer for us, and the inflorescence, depending on the cultivars or selections that are available, range anywhere from maybe 4 to 6 inch inflorescence to maybe 15 to even 18 inch inflorescence on it, of white flowers that may be mostly made up or inflorescence that may be made up of mostly sterile or fertile flowers. The sterile ones are the large ones that you think of when you see hydrangeas, but there'll be a mix of them, and they're on a tall spike instead of the round heads that you get on the traditional Asian ones like Macrophylla. The foliage, though, on this is the distinct thing, and as you know, oak leaf, it has the appearance of an oak, a red oak leaf. So I like this one here. This is one called Lynn Lowry, what we have here in the garden. It is always one of the earliest ones to leaf out. I have 2 plants of it here, and they're almost totally in leaf already, and its neighbor, literally a couple feet away, has barely broke bud. And that's, I think, Allison, if I remember right on that one. But there's variations in size that are available of these. One called Peewee only gets maybe 4 feet tall, while others get maybe 8 to 10 feet tall on these. So there's some wide variation. This isn't one that I recommend doing a lot of pruning on unless you have to contain it into a spot, because one of the characteristics of this species is its bark, which is exfoliating. And in the winter, you get to see this beautiful exfoliating bark after the leaves have fallen or partially fallen. So it gives you great winter interest. Like I said, now the new growth is the highlight of them going into this time of the year. But in a little over a month, we will have these in full flower. And following that, the inflorescence, if you don't cut them off, will remain on the shrub and give you some later summer interest to that as well. So all in all, it's a great plant for us with 4 seasons of interest, and there is variety out there that you can select from. Whether you're growing just a straight seedlings from that you've bought at a nursery or a cultivar, you're going to get a great plant out of an Hydrangea quercifolia, and they will take half shade to nearly full sun. In full sun, they're going to want a little bit more water, but it is a great versatile plant for us here in the southeastern United States. So there are so many natives here that are useful in our landscapes, but sometimes have trouble adapting to our urban environments that they're so often being used for. And this is one that is very adaptable, and you might not think so. This is a bald cypress, or Taxodium disticum. And I don't know if you know where bald cypress live, but these are the quintessential tree that you see in swamps in the southeastern United States. And you're saying, what, a swamp tree? Well, this will do perfectly fine in your landscape. The reason I say it's great for an urban conditions are that it's adapted to low oxygen soils. And that's exactly where it's growing at in a swamp. There's not much oxygen in it. And so much today of our landscapes, the soils are compacted. And so it makes a lot of trees stressed. Well, Taxodium, on the other hand, are happy as a clam in those conditions. They may throw up a few knees, which might complicate your mowing occasionally, but they are going to survive. And they are actually some of the oldest trees, the oldest trees in the eastern United States are Taxodium. I think they found them that are like close to over 2,000 years old in southeastern North Carolina in some of the swamps, actually. So they have been around forever here in the eastern United States. And it's a deciduous conifer, if you don't realize that, and hence bald cypress. And it's just a great tree for us. The needles are easy to clean up. They don't leave a mess, which is another benefit in our urban landscapes today. Aside from the fact that it can take relatively wet or dry conditions without a thought. So in the summer, the growth on it is just a fresh, soft green, occasionally taking a little bit of bronzy coloration during the late summer as they do age a little bit. And then in the fall, they turn just this burnish color. For us here, it's typically in November into early December before they start to finally drop their needles and go deciduous. And because they are deciduous, they offer the ability to grow a lot of stuff underneath them through the winter months here, which is actually an excellent time to garden too for us here. So you can grow stuff underneath here, and if it's winter active, like your hellebores or bulbs, and they are content, they will do well. There's not that competition. From the shade that you get typically from a pine forest or an evergreen forest. So it's not messy. It takes our urban conditions. There are size variations you can get now too. There are some dwarf ones that don't get quite so big. This is going to be a full-size one. This is one called Emerald Shadow, and I don't know the history on this one offhand, but I believe this is going to be a tree that ultimately will probably get up into the 80 to maybe even 100-foot range. So it can become a large tree. They are very, another thing for us here in the Southeast, they're very hurricane resistant. Again, they've been dealing with those for the millennia that they have lived here in the eastern United States. So perfectly adapted for our changing environments, dealing with both drought or fluctuations in water, which may be a deluge or a drought, like I say, as well as compaction or low oxygen conditions in our soils in our everyday landscapes today. And it's, a great park tree, a great one for where people are going to walk and not pay attention, I hate to say it, and be a bit of an be abusive to our landscapes. They're unaffected by those planting holes that you see in our downtown landscapes nowadays too. So they're really resilient. Just a good tree to try in your own landscape. So we're here at what is actually my last plant. I don't know if this will be the last plant in the sequence, but this is a Cercis canadensis, our eastern redbuds. And here at the Arboretum, we have one of the larger collections of these. We have, I don't remember what the acronym is anymore for the multi-institutional collection of plants that are throughout the world, but we have the redbud collection here at the Arboretum. And this is one of them here. This is one, this is a selection called alleviate. It's actually a variegated leafed redbud. But in March here in North Carolina, in the eastern North Carolina, I should say, and then into April in other parts of the state further west, you will see redbuds lining our roads, flowering here and there. The species ranges all throughout the eastern United States, from southern Pennsylvania up into the upper Midwest, as far north even as Wisconsin, and west of the Mississippi, more or less. And there's forms in Texas and northern Mexico that are slightly different, but lumped into the eastern redbuds. You get the Texas redbud and the Mexican redbuds, which are subspecies of this one. All of them make great plants for us here in eastern North Carolina. And there's been so many selections made. Our now retired and emeritus professor, plant breeder and director here at the Arboretum, Dr. Dennis Werner, as well as Tom Ranney, have both created some really cool leaf selections of redbuds, as well as flower selections for their form of color, as well as doubleness on some of the selections. But this is not one of theirs. This is one called alleviate, like I said, and it's a variegated leafed one. There's ones that have burgundy leaves or purple leaves. There's ones that have gold leaves. There's ones that combine the gold and the purple. There's ones that are weeping. There's lots that are upright. So there's a lot of variation there. They're really resilient trees for us here in the Southeast. The flowers are edible, multiple purpose here. Plants, you can throw them in your salad. They might not taste the greatest, but they won't hurt you, and they'll give you some color to that. Also, wonderful pollinator a tree. That is, it's going to provide nectar for the early insects as it comes out in March and April. They are relatively small trees for the most part, mostly say 15 to 25 foot range. So that's going to fit in most of our modern landscapes, is another benefit there. Though there are much smaller selections now too, that range only in the 8 to 10 foot range probably too. So again, there's going to be something that's going to fit in almost every landscape that is we're confronted with today. They are reasonably drought tolerant, so another reason to grow them in our ever-changing environments that we have now. So they are just getting started, but we will have them throughout the garden through the next month or so. So come out and see these. But from all the plants that I've been talking about this morning, you may be wondering, where can I get these? The redbuds, for instance, are readily becoming available at most nurseries, especially here in the Raleigh area, but they are even more widely available throughout the whole eastern United States, I'm sure. You can find them at most garden centers now. You can find seedlings probably at your box store. They may not be as unique as some of these variegated or weeping forms that are available, but they will do quite well in your landscapes. The herbaceous plants that I showed you may be a little bit more difficult to find sometimes. You'll have to go to specialty nurseries. You're not going to find that Opuntia humifusa at too many nurseries, I hate to say it, but it is a fun one. Search it out. You may be able to find it. I know there's some nurseries of all places in the western United States that actually offer selections of Opuntia humifusa. The glandularia or verbena, that one you may be able to find. The straight species is not as widely available as that of so many of the cultivars that are out there today that are hybrids. But if search it out, places like Juniper Level Botanic Garden Plant Delights Nursery will often have it. We occasionally have them. Actually, I had some earlier in the week at our on our plants trailer, but I think they're gone already. Sorry. We'll get a new crop growing, pretty sure. They're really easy to grow. Other things you might check with some native plant nurseries. There's a bunch of those throughout North Carolina, as well as the United States in general. general. Native plants are becoming much more widely available, though you have to search them out a little bit. I mean, there are actually natives in almost every garden center you're going to go to nowadays too. They are not necessarily the wild types. They may be, as we talked about a little bit earlier, nativars or cultivars of natives too. So they are widely available, and it's often funny that some of the nativars are coming back to us from Europe, of all places, where they have done even more selection than we have done here in the United States with them. So you're not going to have trouble finding most of these. Just be patient. You might not have them at every place, but they are not difficult to find. I hope I've spurred you to want to plant some of these plants in your own landscapes and see how they do. I mean, they are often, though, I mean, not all natives are as adaptable as some of the ones I showed you, but some of the ones I showed you are fairly adaptable and really good to use in your own landscapes, and search some of those out. I hope you found this somewhat informational on that, so enjoy.